Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian from Kingdom Hearts Cross Nation, and for today's episode, this is a nice episode. I have finally found a way, a reliable and consistent way too, of actually being able to let you skip 3 medals within PvP on your opponent. Now, originally, I knew this was possible because it's happened to me myself against me like a couple of times within PvP, but I haven't seen it happen too often. But the fact that it's happened to me in the first place makes, let me know that it is possible. It wasn't until just recently I was like, you know what? I want to test this out. I want to see how I can exactly cause this to happen. And through enough testing, I was able to figure out what exactly causes that to happen. So now I'm able to recurrently do it over and over and over to beat people. So for everyone out there that is putting their Kairi Shion EX Plus within their 3rd slot of their setup to avoid status ailments, I'm sorry to tell you, but now you have to put it in your 4th slot if you wanted to avoid getting skipped now after revealing this method. Now, just as a quick recap, in case you haven't watched my status ailment competitive guide video that I've made in the past explaining most of these things, I want to give a quick recap as to how exactly you can make the most out of status ailments. So we know as of right now there are 3 status ailments. There's poison, sleep, and paralysis, okay? Poison lasts indefinitely, so we're not going to worry, we're not going to look at poison too much, okay? The main ones we want to look at though are paralysis and sleep. Hopefully you would know by now that the main strategy as of right now is to try and guarantee that your paralysis boost goes off from your pet skill in order to try and get your opponent to skip 2 medals, okay? That right now is the current strategy. And if we look at the pet skill, it's the paralysis booster that is enabling it. It immobilizes targets you paralyzed. And you only have 1 charge. We also have sleep boosters as well that keeps targets you put to sleep asleep for 3 hits, and you have 2 charges for this per battle. Typically, you would use the sleep or poison to try and get rid of Esuna, and then you would use paralysis boost in order to make your opponent skip 2 medals. Now, before I jump into how exactly to skip the 3 medals, let me quickly explain real quick on how exactly the boosters work. At the very least, the paralysis booster, because that's the one with the most confusion as of right now. And I'm constantly having to explain this. But let me quickly explain how the paralysis booster works. So, in case you don't know, the paralysis booster, this is how the paralysis booster works. The paralysis booster will actually last up until it becomes your opponent's next turn. That means as long as the opponent has not gotten a chance to take their turn yet, your paralysis booster effect will still linger even if you go to different rounds. So paralysis booster is able to transition to other rounds, okay? And just real quick, just to give you guys a brief visual representation to show this, okay? This is what I mean. So let's say you use paralysis booster right here, turn 1. Because of the fact that your opponent gets to take their turn right away, in turn 1, the paralysis booster gets used up, okay? And because of the fact that it's turn 1, it's not going to linger, and of course, the Esuna is going to kick in. It's a terrible eat, and your booster is going to get wasted, okay? So let's just assume that you end up wasting the opponent's Esuna round 1 with sleep or poison. Right? That would mean, let's say on turn 2, regardless of whether or not the opponent has wasted their Esuna or not, if you inflict the booster right here on turn 2, as an attacker by the way, that would mean that because of the fact that the opponent has not taken their turn yet, the effect of the paralysis booster still carries on to round 3, so that if you happen to paralyze them again, if they're not already paralyzed, the effect of the booster will still happen and still make them skip 2 medals on round 3, okay? Because it's not until round 3 that they actually get to take their turn. You kind of get to take your turn twice, basically. This also explains why it would seem how the defender always seems to be able to skip your first 2 medals when they're defending on round 2, okay? I know for quite a long time, people are always like, how come it seems like the defender always gets theirs to go off, but mine never seems to go off on round 3? This is why. This is exactly the reason why. So the same effect that happens as an attacker for turns 2 and 3 actually happens for a defender for turns 1 and 2. So if we're defending, if we really wanted to, we can actually use paralysis turn 1 if we wanted to, because the fact that it will use our booster, it will activate, and because the fact that we are going second turn 1, the opponent isn't able to take their turn yet. So the booster is actually going to transition into turn 2. okay, or round 2, I mean. So in this case, because of the fact that you did use the booster round 1, that means the Esuna of the opponent is going to go off and it's going to make them waste their Esuna. However, you do have that booster. Your booster is still lingering over into turn 2. So if you're able to paralyze the opponent again round 2, all right, P for paralyze. If you're able to paralyze them again round 2, the effect of the booster will still happen and occur and still make them skip their first 2 medals. All right, so this is just a quick explanation as to why it always seems like the defender always gets to skip your medals. This is why. So by now, some of you might be wondering as to, okay, Brian, well, that's great and all, but how exactly does this play into making the opponent skip 3 medals? Okay, well, like I mentioned before, it's happened against me before in the past, so I knew it was possible, so I was trying to figure out ways on how to actually get it to happen. Originally, I thought maybe that if you get both sleep and paralysis to go off at the same time, it would make the opponent skip 3 medals, okay? The reason being for this is that sleep on its own makes you skip 1 medal, as far as I'm aware, and paralysis on its own, not considering boosters by the way, will make you at most skip 2 medals. So this happened to me in the past because of triple threat, because triple threat applies all 3. I just kind of assumed that if you had both sleep and paralysis go off at the same time, that would guarantee that your opponent skips their medals, all right? However, upon further testing, I actually found out that this is not actually completely accurate. And it's actually only half of the equation that's actually making the opponent skip 3 medals. And what is actually causing the opponent to skip 3 medals, and I'll show you an example of this actually happening in game 2. I recorded it in an example. But what is actually causing the opponent to skip 3 medals is actually the sleep booster itself. The sleep booster is actually what causes the opponent to skip 3 medals. I know, crazy stuff, right? After I realized that as well, the wording for the sleep booster actually makes a little bit more sense, because I always interpreted what the sleep booster said, meaning as in like the opponent will stay asleep up to 3 of your hits before the sleep wears off. That's how I always interpreted it, but now when I read it again, it actually makes more sense as to meaning that the sleep booster on the opponent makes them be asleep for 3 of their hits, or hits being interpreted as medals. So maybe that's what it meant, or maybe it means both. I don't know. Union Cross has a tendency to not exactly be the most clear on their wording. So it could be both. It could be just the opponent. I'm not sure. But at the very least, I know how it works now. So real quick, I'm going to actually show you guys an example of me actually applying this in-game in one of my testing setups. But before I show that, I just want to explain to you guys real quick how exactly I went about testing it, in case any of you guys wish to try and test things in the future regarding status elements. So because of the fact that we're using the sleep booster as the main source of making the opponent skip their medals, this is what I had to do. So for the testing, we are going to be the attacker. I can't really test it as a defender, obviously. Basically, the main obstacles that we end up having to work around are the fact that turn 1 is an automatic Esuna guarantee. And if I haven't wasted their Esuna by turn 1, I would have to waste it by turn 2 at the very least, so that way I could use sleep round 3 to guarantee and make sure that I can skip their medals. Now, in case you're wondering, well, why can't you just waste Esuna round 1 and then use sleep round 2? That is because of the fact that you are going second round 2 as an attacker, and you go first right away for round 3, which would mean that all the attacks that you do on round 3 are just going to make the sleep that you inflicted on round 2 go away. So it's because of that reason that we can't really use round 2 as the testing round to try and find out whether or not the sleep actually works, which is the entire reason why we are using round 3 as kind of like the testing round. Luckily, because of the fact we're not really testing paralysis for this either, I don't have to worry about trying to specifically get paralysis to go off in round 1, so that way it doesn't interfere with rounds 2 and 3. So what you'll actually see me doing within my example video I'm about to show you guys is the fact that I'm actually not going to use any status ailments round 1. I could, I just chose not to. I'm not going to use any status ailments round 1. I'm going to use status ailments round 2 using triple threat to get rid of my opponent's Esuna round 2, but I will at the very least be left with 1 sleep charge left for my sleep booster, in which case I will apply the sleep booster round 3 to work on my opponent when they go and take their turn for round 3 to see whether or not it's actually the sleep booster or not that applies effects, which it does. So now that I've explained the process, let me go ahead and show you guys the setup that I used real quick so you guys have an idea as to like how exactly I did it to get it off. Okay, so this is my turn 1 setup. Keep in mind too that my intention for testing for this battle was not to win. It was just simply to test whether or not like what actually causes the 3 medals to go off. I actually ended up winning, but that was not the intention. But as you can see right here, like I explained, on my Dark Knowledge, this is my first setup. I did not have any status ailment skills on any of my medals at all whatsoever for my first round setup. This is just to help control what booster effects actually go off and such. Okay, so round 1, I don't use any ailment effects. Round 2, I'm using my Fenrir and this Keyblade. For round 2, I'm actually using triple threat on my stained glass, and I'm using this to actually get rid of my opponent's Esuna for round 2. And then round 3, I'm using a turtle setup. Again, I wasn't actually expecting to win with this. I was just testing out whether or not I can make them skip their medals. But I'm using my turtle setup round 3, in which case I am using King Mickey B over here to purposely get rid of all my gauges, solely because of the fact that I have the vanilla sleep skill on both my Timeless River Pete and Diz. And in case you aren't aware, the vanilla status ailment skills require you to tap or swipe on the opponent in order to actually use the status ailment ability. So I purposely chose 2 like tier 1 and 2 medals that had extra attack. I put the vanilla sleep ailment skills on them. So that way I actually get to use or have a chance of using sleep on the opponent up to 4 times, because each of these have extra attack. And it's these 2 medals right here that will actually get my last sleep charge to go off and inflict on the opponent to make sure that they're actually asleep and to see whether or not it actually works the way I intended. Okay, so now that I've explained that, let's go ahead and show you guys my... So now that I finally explained all that, let's go ahead and jump into the actual video that I recorded showing me doing this. But let's go ahead and play this, and I'll stop it here and there to point things out, okay? All right. So this is the beginning of the battle. That was my first battle. My first medal, I was using Axiom Pluto, okay? Again, like I mentioned before, this first setup has no status ailment abilities on it whatsoever. I'm kind of literally just playing round 1 just to get past round 1. Alright, so now we're finished with round 1. And as you can see, they made me waste my Esuna. That's not our main concern. We don't really care about that. Okay, right here for round 2 is where things actually start happening. Okay, so the opponent is going first. I'm going to go ahead and let them take their turn going before showing some of the stuff that's happening on my turn. Well, when it actually gets to my turn. Alright, so now it's my turn. I'm using Kiara here. It's just defense, blah, blah, blah. Okay, right here, now this is where I'm actually going to be applying the status ailments. Triple Threat did go off, as you can tell, just by looking at the opponent. And as you can actually tell in a second if it pops up on the side of the screen. There we go. You can see right here that it did, the Triple Threat 2 did go off. And we're going to see all the boosters go off with it. So you can see here as well that I did get all the boosters here. These boosters are actually irrelevant because of the fact that they do not affect my next setup for next turn, okay? The whole point of it was simply to just get rid of my opponent's Esuna for round 2. Alright, so I did end up beating my opponent on round 2, which lets me to be able to actually test whether or not the sleep goes off for round 3. Okay, so now here is where things start getting a little spicy. So I kind of just like, just multicasted Zexion Plus a bajillion times because I was like, why not? Okay, it's my turtle setup, so hey, whatever. So that's what I ended up doing right here. Now I am going to be using King Mickey B to waste all my gauges so that way I'm forced to tap on my opponent. And as you can see right here, I did put my opponent to sleep with one of my medals, one of my last medals, okay? And hopefully after enough of these defense boosting max triggers go off, it will show at the actual sleep boost on the left-hand side showing that it did go off for my attack. So let's play that again. So we're still waiting on the left-hand side for all of this to go away. Okay, blah, blah, blah. There we go. So here's the sleep boost that I was talking about. This is where it finally showed up. Okay. So this was from my turn, actually. And it was not actually from his turn at all whatsoever. So now that we actually pointed out the booster that went up for my turn, let me go ahead and replay the last few parts again just to show you guys, in case you didn't see it already, that the opponent actually skipped their 3 metals. So we're going back to the end of my turn for round 3, in which case I am applying sleep on the opponent. So they are asleep with the booster going off, okay? There you go. They skipped 3 metals and they're automatically on their 4th metal, okay? And because of the fact I have just so much defense and they have no buffs or debuffs on me at all whatsoever, they're pretty much doing almost no damage at all whatsoever. Like they're pretty much screwed right there. Now, just for clarity, I have tested this multiple times just to make sure it wasn't a fluke or anything. And to make sure it was actually the sleep booster going off, and it's been happening really consistently. It's happened every single time, so I know for a fact it's the sleep booster. But now that we know that the sleep booster can actually make you skip 3 metals, which is actually already just makes sleep better than paralysis, that means there's obviously some pros and cons between sleep and paralysis. Sleep is a little bit harder to get off because it does require you to use sleep and the sleep booster within the last couple slots of your Keyblade setup. However, paralysis is easier to get off because you can use it anywhere in the setup. So you can use it on your main utility buffer debuffer metals at the beginning of your setup if you wanted to, and get the paralysis booster to go off if needed, and lets you be able to do more with your setup later on in terms of damage. So each one has their pros and cons. Sleep is harder to get off but gives you more of a reward by skipping 3 metals, whereas paralysis is easier to get off but only lets you skip 2 metals, okay? So they have each of the pros and cons. However, let's just take into consideration strategy on what is the best way to actually use sleep now in this case then. So as an attacker, that would mean that in order to use sleep appropriately, you would have to get rid of Esuna either turn 1 or turn 2 so that way you can use sleep within the last few metals of your setup to get the booster go off and use it round 3, okay? Just make sure that you actually still have enough boosters, sleep boosters, in order to make sure this actually happens. Personally, I would recommend using paralysis now, in this case, round 1, just to make sure that the opponent actually gets rid of their Esuna at the beginning of their turn, so that way that even if they happen to have the new Kairi Shown EX Plus, the Esuna will actually trigger first and waste their Esuna before they can actually start using their metals, such as like Kairi Shown EX Plus. So in this case, in terms of trying to enable sleep, paralysis turn 1, if you choose to use it turn 1, would be your best option. If you choose not to use it turn 1 and you try to get rid of their Esuna round 2 instead, you can use either poison or paralysis, either one. Okay, now what about defending? What if we want to try and get sleep to go off for defending? Okay, defending is always a lot easier in terms of getting status ailments to go off, in which case what you would end up wanting to do is same thing for round 1, although slightly different. Because of the fact you are going second for round 2, you can use either paralysis or poison round 1 in order to make sure and get rid of your opponent's Esuna for round 1, because the Esuna will kick in at the very least at the end of the round. So you can do that to get rid of Esuna turn 1. Round 2 is where it's going to be very similar to how round 3 is for an attacker. This is where you want to start using sleep within the last couple metals of your Keyblade setup, so that way the sleep booster can still kick in and carry and hit the opponent for that round 2 and make them skip their 3 metals. So I hope this ends up actually helping you guys out. I already know that this is going to piss off a lot more players now, especially those who are already trying to put their, like, you know, main buffer debuffer metals such as Kairi Shown EX Plus in their 3rd slot. So it's gonna hurt them even more when they're forced to try and even go as far as doing it in their 4th slot if they really want to. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that bell button. It's the best way to know when I upload more videos such as this one. If you happen to find anything else, or you have questions, comments, or concerns that you would like to mention, go ahead and let me know in the comment section down below. But other than that, my name is Brian from Kingdom Hearts Cross Nation, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.